Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the Multiple Careers podcast. This is episode number 16, and in today's episode, I want to answer the question of what are the top skills that employers are looking for when they are hiring people. This question was asked to me by one of my listeners, and I have rephrased the question a bit, but I think that this is a topic that will interest a lot of people. Anyone who is currently looking for a new job or changing careers will definitely benefit from listening to this episode. So in this episode, my plan is to walk you through 5 skills that I personally think are super important and that are in demand and that are really important to employers. But before I continue, I want to preface this a bit, and I want to say that, of course, there are a bunch of skills that are very important and very in demand, but it will always differ on a case-by-case basis because the hiring process is not something that is sterile and that is standardized, but it's very much a human interaction, and it's very much a relationship that is being formed between the employer and the potential employee. So it's not always that clear cut. And of course, depending on who is hiring you, depending on their own personality, their preferences, it will also differ what they prioritize, what they think is more important for that job. So that being said, I want to make a further differentiation by saying that in terms of skills, I would say that you can basically divide skills that you need on the job into 2 main basic categories of skills. The first group are specific skills, and the second group is universal or transferable skills. So what do I mean by specific skills? By specific skills, I mean those kind of skills that you need specifically for a certain kind of job. So it could even be very specific to a certain job ad. And this is what I mean. In general, for a certain role, let's say for the role of an accountant, you might need, let's say, 5 specific skills. But for the specific job ad, the specific position that an employer is looking to fill, there might be even more specific skills needed. For example, you need to be able to work with a certain kind of application, or they want you to be very knowledgeable and skilled with applying for tax credits and so on, right? So in this episode here, I do not want to talk about the specific skills because, of course, it will depend on what your industry is, what you're applying for exactly. So that will be too specific. For example, if you're applying for a job as designer, there will be specific design skills. If you're applying as a dentist, there will be skills related to dentistry and so on. So the only way that I can go about it in this video is to talk about the universal or transferable skills. So what are these? Universal skills are those kind of skills that are universally appreciated and required and in demand by employers. No matter what industry you're in, no matter what role you're applying for, employers will always appreciate these skills. And these are also transferable skills. So what are transferable skills? Transferable skills are skills that you can take with you and use no matter what job you're in. So even though you're changing careers and you're previously working, let's say in banking as project manager, like I did, and then you're moving into the film industry and you're working as producer there are a set of skills that even though you change industries, you change roles, you still need and you can still apply in your on a daily basis. And these are actually the skills that I think really matter because you can develop and improve on these skills throughout your whole life and throughout your whole career, no matter how many smaller changes you make in your career. So this is what I want to go through today, and there are 5. And a disclaimer up front, these 5 skills that I kind of grouped together, they are based on various articles and blog posts that I read. So based on people in HR and hiring people, they came up with these skills that they think are very important. But it's also a selection of the skills that I personally think are very important based on my own experience working in 4 countries. So I worked in 4 countries so far, and being on the side, being on the employee side, looking for a job and applying for jobs, but also being on the employer or the hiring side. I was also I also had some experience hiring people to come on my team. So I kind of try to combine my experience with what I found on the web, what other people say, to kind of crystallize these 5 skills, these 5 categories of skills. And I also want to try to go through it and just explain these in a way that makes sense of the jargon, because there's a lot of jargon out there. If you read blogs and articles about skills that are needed, sometimes you ask yourself, what is the difference between this skill, and what does this actually mean, and how do I show that I have this skill? How do I develop this skill? So I want to try and make it more digestible and more practice oriented, and I hope that I will be able to do that. So let's start with the first one. The first cluster of skills that I think that every employer will look for, that is super important no matter where you work, in which industry you work, in whatever country you work in, are problem solving skills. So this sounds like a huge thing, but it's actually very simple and very common sense. What are problem solving skills? Problem solving skills are skills, all the skills that you need in order to solve a problem. Whose problems? The company's problems, the employer's problems. So the reason that they are hiring you in the first place is because they have this problem, this task. Problem here doesn't mean that something is problematic or that something is necessarily stressful, right? Or interrupting anything. Problem here just means that there is this thing that needs to be done, that needs to be carried out, that needs to be brought to completion, and someone needs to solve it, right? And there are a variety of skills that fall under this category of problem solving, which includes, for example, analytical skills. What are analytical skills? Analytical skills are basically the capability, the skill to analyze a situation. Before you can even start and solve a problem, you need to first of all analyze the situation, right? So let's just say that you are a social media manager, and the problem that you want to solve for the company is you want to make their product known to the public. Let's just say, for example, they sell soap, like some kind of I don't know, some kind of organic soap, let's say, right? So this is a new product and they want to bring it to the public. So you as a social media manager, your job is to solve their problem of how can this product get known to the public? How can the public become aware of the brand and existence of the soap? So first of all, to solve this problem, you need to be able to think analytically, right? So for example, you need to think about, okay, what does this product consist of? What are the benefits? What are the features of this product versus what is already available in the market? What do people like? What is lacking? What is in demand, and so on. So you need to kind of have the capability to analyze the situation and also analyze the data that is connected to it. And then what's also attached to problem solving skill is critical thinking. You need to not just accept everything as at face value, but you need to have the skill of critically asking important questions that are relevant to solving that question, solving that problem. For example, if one strategy hasn't been working for a while, you need to be able to think critically and find reasons why this hasn't worked and try to find the solution to that. And another thing also connected to problem solving is decision-making skills. This is something that is also often mentioned as a skill that is sought after, but I think that decision-making actually falls under problem solving, because a company will not hire you simply because you have the skill of making decisions, right? That is just that is just one function. What they're actually after is that they want you to solve their problem. They are hiring you to solve a specific problem. If you're an accountant, they want you to solve their problem of inputting the transactions or coming up with a financial statement and so on. And in order to solve the problem, you need to be able to make decisions, because it's actually common sense, but it's not as straightforward, and not everyone can do it well. Making decisions is not that easy. So you might have the experience before of maybe facing a difficult situation and you're stuck between two options and you just can't make a decision. You just don't know what to decide, and then you're kind of stuck and you're not making progress and you waste a lot of time, and that impedes your ability to solve a problem efficiently. And that is the reason why when you're in a job interview, this is one of the popular questions that HR people or hiring managers ask. They often ask you the question of whether you have faced a difficult situation before and how you managed to make a good decision, because they want to know if you're capable of that or not. So that's problem solving, and I think that's a skill that's not only required to get a job or to work well in a job, but it's also a very important life skill, problem solving. So the next skill that I think employers look for is project management skills. And I don't mean this in a sense of the role of a project manager, as in you being able to use project management applications or project management jargon, but I mean this in a much more basic sense. Project management simply means that when you are given a project or a task, you are able to carry out this thing from end to end. So you are not just picking out one specific part of, let's say, this bigger problem or this task and just solving that, but you are able to look at this problem end to end. One thing that is very important in project management is, for example, the ability to deal with different stakeholders. And nowadays, most of us work in companies that have many employees, so not just 5 people or 10 people like in a mom and pop shop, or even 2 or 3 or 4 people, but many of us work in very large organizations, and there are so many stakeholders there, right? There are people in finance, in HR, and marketing, and everything. So you cannot work in a silo. Every time you make a decision or you work on your own project or your own task, you have to consider these other stakeholders in the back of your mind and think about any kind of implications it might have on other areas, right? So that is one aspect of project management. Another aspect is leadership skills. This is also something that is very often mentioned and also very in demand, that you have leadership skills. And I think that this is also a part of project management skills, because when you manage a project, when you have the ability to get things done end to end, you need to be able to lead. And leading doesn't necessarily mean that you have a big team or any kind of team at all and you lead other people, although of course that can also be the case. But leading basically means that you take the initiative, and you are someone who is proactive. So the opposite of a leader would be someone who just sits back and waits for things to happen, for you to be given tasks or for you to get instructions. But if you're a leader, then if you take on a leadership role or a leadership mindset, you are the one who is initiating things. You are the one that says, okay, let's do this, let's start this. If there's a problem, then you find out what is the problem. If you need resources, you go and try to figure out how to get the resources, and so on. And the last thing that is also connected to project management is self-management skills. This is also something that is very often mentioned in blogs, the ability to manage yourself. And this is very intuitive, because if you're not able to manage yourself, your own work, how can you operate within an organization, right? So you need to be able to manage your time and your tasks and everything very efficiently. And this again also is a skill that's not only valuable to a company, but this is also something that you really need in your own life. No matter if it means if you're out to get a new job or change careers, or you're moving to another country, or even just moving house or planning a vacation, you need to have project management skills that ensures that everything will get done end to end. So for example, if you're planning a vacation with your family, it doesn't just mean that you go and book a ticket and then everything will happen, right? Project management skills means that you think about all the aspects that you need to plan and prepare. You need to perhaps take some leave, and then you need to ask your spouse and agree on a date, and then you need to check with the school of your kid whether they can take maybe additional few days off. And then you need to check the weather in your country of destination. What kind of clothes do you need? What you need to pack, when you need to pack, etc. And once you made the decisions, you need to communicate it back to your family, etc. You need to coordinate many different aspects. So yeah, that was project management skills. And let's go on to the next one. The next skill is grouped under teamwork and collaboration skills. And here again, there are many skills that I would group under this umbrella, teamwork and collaboration. This also is really common sense. If you want to work in a company with other people, you need to be able to work together with them. You cannot work in a silo. You cannot just work on your own thing and don't care about anyone else and not listen to anyone else and just do your thing. It's just not possible. If that's who you are, then perhaps you're better off working self-employed and working by yourself. So if you work for a company, you need to be able to work in a team and to collaborate with other people, because other people will have their ideas, they will have their opinions. Some people have stronger opinions, and you have to be able to deal with that. You will need to be able, you need to have the skill of listening to other people, taking in what they say, but then also negotiating an outcome and coming up with a decision that you in regards to how you want to move forward with the thing that you're working on together. And yeah, there are a lot of skills that go into this category, among others social skills, of course. So how do you deal with people? How do you relate to people? Also flexibility is also very important and very often mentioned by employers, because when you work in a company with many people and a lot of things change all of the time, you cannot be stubborn and want to stick to doing the things the way that you want to do things just because you like doing it that way. It just doesn't work. You need to be flexible enough to adjust to changing schedules, to changing priorities. And nowadays, I'm sure you know what I mean, priorities change very often in companies. One day this is the target, and then the next day there's another goal that you need to focus on, and then there's a change of management, and then things change again. So if you're not flexible and you're not willing to adapt to the changes happening in the company, then it will be very, very difficult for you to get a job. So flexibility, the skill of flexibility, and also being adaptive, being able to adapt to the situation that's going on. So the next thing are verbal and written communication skills. This is something that I think is very, very underrated. I mean, verbal and written communication skills, it sounds like, if I'm not a writer, why should I care? If I'm not a journalist, if I'm not a copywriter, a novelist, why should I care about verbal and written communication skills, right? I mean, as long as I can write an email, that's enough, right? But that's so wrong, because nowadays, I think because there are so many people working together and timelines are usually very short and you need to get a lot of things done together with many people, and remote. In addition to that, remote nowadays, your verbal and written communication skills need to be very, very strong. And while this skill might not be the most important thing of all of these things, I mean, I would personally say, okay, problem solving skills are maybe more important because you actually want to solve the problem, right? That's the goal of having you in that position, in that role. But the problem is when you are applying for a job, if you are in an interview, what will show the most during that interview, even from the start of the application process, when you hand in your resume, what will show are your communication skills. So if you submit your resume, your resume is a form of communication. You communicate to the company, okay, this is what I can do, this is who I am, this is what I have done. And I know it's so difficult to do that, right? It's so difficult to encapsulate everything into this one piece of paper or 2 pages. But that is basically all that the company gets in first instance from you. And based on that, they will look through the resumes and then invite you to an interview or do a phone interview. And that is where you can prove your verbal communication skills. You talk with someone from HR or with a hiring manager, and you communicate to them why you are interested in this company, what your skills are, why you would be useful for the company and can solve their problems, and so on. And it doesn't always go hand in hand with your actual skills. So 2 people might have the exact same skills, but one might be better at communicating their skills or their abilities. So who of these 2 people do you think will get the job, right? Possibly the one who has the better communication skills. So this famous psychologist, perhaps you know him, Jordan B. Peterson from Canada, he said that if you're able to write and able to speak, then you're deadly. I hope that I got the quote right, but something along those lines. So what he basically meant is that the skill to communicate in written form and in verbal form is so important, because if you cannot do that, you cannot communicate anything to others about yourself, about your ideas, about your opinion, and you will not have any impact at all. So this is something that I would definitely recommend you to work on, no matter what industry you work in, no matter what your role you're in. Communication skills are definitely important. And these actually go beyond just verbal and written skills. So verbal as in speaking to people, and written, writing emails, writing presentations, reports, etc. It's also connected to emotional skills, right? So the way you interact with people, because you can say one thing, but if you say it in a wrong way, in a way that puts other people off, in a way, then that can also backfire, and that's also not easy to do. I think that it requires a lot of introspection, and it requires a lot of practice. It requires a lot of talking to people, conversing with people, and also practicing to listen to other people. Because if you can't listen, you cannot communicate, right? If you talk to an HR person or an employer, a hiring person, or they ask you a question, but you don't really register the question, you don't really listen to them, and you talk about something else or don't really answer the question, then they might get the impression that, okay, this person cannot really listen, and is maybe even not able to take instructions later on when we work together. So it's very important, listening skills, and also the ability to respond appropriately. So let's go on to the last skill. And I had trouble finding this skill in blogs and articles. This is not mentioned a lot, but I have actually realized from my own experience, and also from talking with other people who have recently looked for a job and found one, that this skill is very, very important, especially in this century, especially in a century where there are so many technological advances and changes. There is really so much change happening at a very rapid pace. We are working with different applications. We are working in different ways. and yeah, producing new kinds of services and products. And it's not enough to just have one set of skill for your entire life. You need to constantly adapt and learn new skills. But which skills you need to learn will depend on the job that you are applying for in particular, right? So that makes it kind of tricky. So if you knew in advance that these are the 5 specific skills that I need to master in advance, then that could make it very easy. If you already know in advance, okay, I want to work for this company and I want to work in exactly this role, and you find a job ad and you want to prepare yourself specifically for that job ad, then of course you can try to match your requirements and your skills exactly to fit this ad, right? And you look at the skill, okay, I need to be able to work with this application, and therefore I go and learn how to use this application. But the problem is that by the time that you learn this application, the job might already be gone. Someone else might already applied and got the job, right? So it's very, very difficult to kind of always be on top of everything and have the right skills at the right moment, right? So anyway, back to the skill that I wanted to talk about. The skill that I'm talking about here that's super important is the skill of learning new skills fast. So what does this mean? This is kind of a meta skill. So it's not about any particular skill, but it is about the ability to learn new skills fast. And this is why it's very important. If you apply for a job, and for example, there are 8 requirements listed, but you are only skilled at, let's say, 6, and you're not skilled at 2. Like, let's say that these 2 are applications that you haven't worked with, right? At first, this might discourage you from applying at all, right? But I would say that even though you do not fulfill all of the requirements, you still stand a chance of getting that job, because what are the chances of there being a lot of people out there who fulfill exactly this requirement, right? So of course the company, they have their ideal requirements that they want a job applicant to have, but it doesn't mean that they can always get someone with that exact set of experience and skills. So in many cases, they will accept someone who does not fulfill all of these, let's say 8 requirements, but only 6 or 7. So in this case, what you need to demonstrate is that you have the ability to learn new things fast. And how can you do that? Among others, you can do that by telling the employer of an example where you learned a new application in your previous job in, for example, just 1 month. Or you can show initiative that in your free time, in your own free time, you always try to learn new things. And this is what you learned recently. For example, I don't know, a language, or let's say Excel. Let's say that you've not been very good at Microsoft Excel, but you've kind of self-learned this in the last 3 months during the pandemic when you had more time. So this shows to the employer that you not only have the skill of learning and mastering new things fast, but you also have the willingness. And this is very, very important, because even if you get the job, there will be new things that you will have to learn. So the employer will really want to and appreciate it if they get an employee who is willing to put in the work, who has this mindset of constant learning, who doesn't just remain stagnant and is satisfied with their current ability, but is constantly trying to improve. So yeah, and this skill of learning new skills fast is not just a skill that is necessary to get a job, but it's also a skill that is so useful and indispensable in your own life. No matter what your job will be in the future, what career you want to change to, you will always need to be able to learn new things fast. Especially, in the next few decades, there will be so many new developments with AI, with technology, with automation. If you want to remain in the job market, if you want to have a competitive advantage, you have to keep on learning. You can never stop learning, and that is something that you have to demonstrate to the potential employer. Okay, so those were the 5 top skill groups that I think employers look for when hiring people. But this is a very important but. It doesn't mean that if you have all of these skills, it doesn't mean that that guarantees that you will have a job, because this is just part of the equation. Having the skills, having the experience is just part of the equation of getting a job. It takes much more, or sometimes it takes less to get a job. So what that means I'll talk about in another podcast episode, because that will take a bit of time. So stay tuned. I'm planning to release episodes more frequently in the future. So don't forget to let me know in the comments what you think, what you thought about this episode, whether or not it was useful, what your thoughts and experiences are, and also drop me any of your other questions that you might have, and I might turn that into another podcast episode. So thank you so much for watching, and also don't forget, it's never too late to change your career, and with that, change your whole life for the better. Take care.